Welcome to NFL Power Rankings. It is presented by Energizer Mike Yam, along with my guru, and you can see his entire list of rankings on NFL.com. Eric Edholm is with me. And Eric, look, week one officially now in the rearview mirror. Just like every other year, we think we know something heading into the first set of games, and it turns out we really don't.
I guess I should have paid past attention to Bengals week one performances, right? I had everybody, I didn't realize that was like a bye week for them. But yeah, I mean, passing yards are down, rushing yards. I mean, they had some big resurgent running back performances from guys we'd maybe push to the side a little bit, and great kicking too, unbelievable. And some fantastic finishes in the first few primetime games. A very, very exciting and interesting week one.
Look, we won't lead with Cincinnati, although I think there's an argument here on power rankings on where they are going to sit. I promise we will get to that in just a bit. But let's unveil 1 through 8. We did see some movement in the top, but not necessarily at 1 and 2. Kansas City and San Francisco. The Chiefs in week 1 victorious, as were the Niners on Monday Night Football. So KC at 1, San Francisco at 2. The Detroit Lions, a gutty win in overtime against the Rams. Philadelphia, team that actually flashed a new offensive toy in Saquon Barkley. Yeah, he was spectacular. The Ravens obviously suffered that loss against the Chiefs. They fall 2 spots from those preseason rankings, now sitting at 5th. Houston, run game, it's strong. We'll talk about the Texans in a moment. They're 6th. The Bills got a scare against Arizona, but Eric's got them sitting at 7. And then those Dallas Cowboys. Yes, Dak got paid, CD got paid. And the Cowboys, I don't know, maybe this NFC East might look a whole lot different than we had anticipated. More on that in just a moment. But let's start at the top with Kansas City. Eric, at least on paper, I felt like Kansas City was going to be a better team heading into this season than last year. I thought they looked absolutely terrific. And the one thing that I was confident in, just like everyone else, was Xavier Worthy was going to be a stud and change the complexion of this team. That's exactly how it played out.
Yeah, I mean, he's proof positive that you can have kind of a gadget player, if you will, at least at this stage of his career, who could touch the ball, 3, 4, 5, 6 times in a game and have a profound impact. And, he's sort of exactly what they were missing last year. There's a reliability factor. I'm sure he'll drop some passes at some point this season, but right now he's got Patrick Mahomes' trust, at least in a limited capacity. And then the growth of Rashee Rice as well, kind of, bookending that. So, they don't have to have Travis Kelce have a monster game like he did against the Ravens in the playoffs last year to win one of those big contests. So I was impressed with the diversity. Isaiah Pacheco ran hard in the second half, and that's the kind of formula that I think is going to be a little smoother offensively and work wonders this year compared to last year, which, look, they won the Super Bowl, but still, we know how much of a grind it was to get to that point.
Eric, I think most weeks we will probably be starting the show with the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think the San Francisco 49ers, who sit at number 2, will also be in this conversation. Who needs Christian McCaffrey, right? I mean, whatever.
Just get Jordan Mason, a guy who had never carried the ball more than 22 times in a game since high school. Give him 6 more than that. Shocked him when he found out after the game how many touches he had. And run that same kind of outside run off the tackle tight end gap, the C gap out there. And, they kind of simplified things, and the Jets didn't adjust to it. So credit to Kyle Shanahan. I thought his game plan was terrific. He caused the Jets to kind of burn some timeouts there and, have some personnel issues getting the right people on the field. And 6 field goals, right? They'd love to convert some of those into touchdowns. But when Jake Moody has a career night and, you score 32 points and hold the opponent under 20, pretty good formula, right? So no McCaffrey, Trent Williams and Brandon Ayuk still kind of gearing up. Williams left the game late. Ayuk had kind of a quiet game. And they're still this dangerous against the team that supposedly has a very good defense. So, yeah, beware. 49ers don't appear to be going anywhere.
Yeah, I think you touched on some really important big picture points, especially with Brandon Ayuk and Trent Williams. Williams played really well. I think it was like 65 consecutive snaps, whatever it was. But the point is, he was even joking. We had the interview on Monday Night Football on our postgame show on Game Day Final with Omar Ruiz, and he kind of chuckled and laughed about conditioning. He's not quite there. He's close, but it's a guy that wasn't out there for a good stretch of pretty much the entire preseason. He did not play. So the San Francisco 49ers still scratching the surface here. At number 3 on your list, the Detroit Lions, and I think this is fitting based off of 1 and 2. The Lions deserve this spot. That was, in my mind, an impressive win, and I give a lot of credit to the Rams here, but I think we learned some things, especially about this team's offense, and we've been waiting for Jameson Williams to sort of be the wide receiver that we had anticipated and saw when he was in college. I think this might be that breakout year for him.
Yeah, there have been a lot of roadblocks for Jamison Williams prior to this. We'd seen the flash plays, obviously the touchdown against San Francisco in the playoffs, some other flash moments, even back to his rookie year, but he's never been able to put it all together. Since tearing his ACL, some off-field stuff, just some maturity and growth that's happened. And you hear Dan Campbell and the rest of the team talk about him. It's clear they have a trust and a belief in him. And thank goodness, right? I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown had probably one of his worst games as a pro, or at least impactful at the very least. And the run game, looked okay early, but really didn't get going until that last drive there in overtime. So, they didn't have the full offensive picture. Sam Laporta took him a while to get him the ball as well. Jahmyr Gibbs had a kind of a limited role early in the game. So even though the Lions built a lead, they did it with kind of limited offense. And Williams was really their one true threat in that game. Still worried about the secondary. Matthew Stafford behind a beat-up offensive line was picking them apart there at the end. Terrion Arnold was up against it, and he left the game briefly at the end. But if they could figure that secondary out, and still be able to win games like this where they're not A+ on offense, I still really like the formula and think they're going to be one of the winners this year.
Yeah, look, they try to address that secondary, and I'm glad you pointed it out. It does feel like that is still a work in progress. Last year it was an issue. You mentioned Arnold, they drafted him. It's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out from a Lions perspective. And by the way, I do want to love up the Rams. I promise here on NFL Power Rankings, we will do that in just a couple of minutes because there's a lot of hat tips that I think we can give to Sean McVay's squad. Meanwhile, it's time for Future Champions presented by FanDuel. This is the odds right now in the NFC East. Philadelphia, who flexed in such a big way in their opener in Brazil with Saquon Barkley. According to FanDuel, certainly the favorite. The Dallas Cowboys not too far behind the Commanders, and we'll save the Giants for the end of the show, and there's a good reason for that. But look, the Eagles, you have them moving up one spot. They are fourth right now. I don't know if the debut for Saquon Barkley, like he dreamed about it before this game. Right. He didn't even envision a performance like this.
Yeah, I'm sure this was the kind of thing that they sold him on in free agency. Look, we haven't been associated as a team that has these big feature running backs, but they kind of reimagined things, and I'm sure Kellen Moore had some input on that as well. But basically just saying, with everybody focusing on Devontae Smith and everybody focusing on A.J. Brown, you and Dallas Goedert have a chance to absolutely gut teams. He did it with that great wheel route on the outside. He did it up the middle with power. He did it up the middle with finesse too. So there was a great showcase of everything he brings, a healthy Barkley brings to an offense. Now, I think internally they would probably say, look, this is a guy who's missed at least a handful of games every year, in some cases more than half a season. So I'm sure they're prepared for losing Barkley at some point, but when they have him, they are a different kind of offense, I should say. And then you have a breakout on the other side with Zach Bond too, a guy who Vic Fangio, I think, has kind of weaponized in a new role as an off the ball linebacker. I mean, he led the NFL in tackles in week 1, had 2 sacks, including the game clincher there. So, 2 new faces along with Fangio and Kellen Moore. That quartet really had a nice debut in Brazil, and they're going to bring that back home, and I can't wait to see how it works out this season.
Yeah, they will get to the Atlanta Falcons, who we'll touch on a little bit later here. Not the debut Kirk Cousins was hoping for, but the Eagles and the Falcons will be playing on Monday Night Football. Meanwhile, at number 5, the Ravens, in our preseason rankings, or not ours, yours, on our show last week.
They're ours. They're all of ours.
Okay. Well, I had said this to you. I thought the Baltimore Ravens last year were the best team in the NFL. And I thought the ranking was deserving, but they dropped 2 spots after this loss against Kansas City. I got to be honest with you, Eric. Like, there were some moments where I'm like, they don't necessarily look like the team that I saw last year. Some breakdowns on defense that were certainly uncharacteristic as the dominant team on that side of the football a year ago.
We knew they lost some stuff. We knew, obviously, Mike McDonald taking the Seattle job. You elevate Zach Orr, who was 31 when he took over the job, one of the youngest coordinators or anyone at that level in the NFL with that much responsibility. So there was always going to be an adjustment period there, but didn't feel like there was a consistent enough rush, didn't feel like the coverage was tight enough, didn't feel like the tackling. And when you see the same slant go to Rashee Rice every single time and they don't have an answer for it, you get a little concerned. I realized the game essentially came down to one toe, right? The Ravens could have won this game very, very easily had one play gone a little different than the next play, right? But at the same time, to your point, I just kept seeing mistake after mistake, a lot of them self-inflicted, right? These weren't physical mistakes. In a lot of cases, they were mental mistakes. And the Ravens just can't have that, right? I mean, they're not kind of built to be this huge comeback team. They're built to play from ahead. We didn't get to see a ton of Derrick Henry. The formula was just sort of thrown out of whack a little bit with their own mistakes. And if I know John Harbaugh at all, he's going to get this thing fixed. They usually do. They almost always do. But that's got to be a primary concern that they focused on during this kind of mini bye as they gear up for week 2.
Look, this is probably the worst that we're going to see this team play. And by the way, almost could have won it on the road against the reigning Super Bowl champs. By the way, 2 quick things here. I don't know if you saw the post-game press conference. Patrick Mahomes, some advice to Likely there. You wear the white cleats. Please wear the white cleats.
Smart
forward.
Man. He knows.
And very quickly here, I just want to get your take. When the touchdown looked like it was a touchdown, I don't know if you saw Harbaugh on the sideline. He's like, they were going to go for the win here. Are you with me? The King was going to find a way to get into the end zone. They would have won this thing.
I think right. It was going to end on the next play, right? Yeah. That was when the game was going to be decided. You saw Harbaugh. He wasn't going to be able to drag his team through overtime or one more defensive series. They wanted to go win it.
I wanted to get you in trouble on social media by saying that they were definitely going to win. I thought they were going to win. Houston Texans, they check in at number 6 here. Eric, 2 of the big pieces on the offensive side that they brought in absolutely balled out in this game. Diggs and Mixon were terrific.
They sure were, especially Joe Mixon, right? I mean, we've obviously seen Stephon Diggs perform at a high level, but running backs in general tend to wear down at his age. And, we'd seen the kind of gradual decline. There was a reason why Cincinnati was ready to move on from him, despite having no obvious replacement for him. So, yeah, I mean, I felt he looked great. Maybe it was the scheme. Maybe it was the fact that obviously CJ Stroud's at quarterback and he's got, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, and all the others. And it just looked the way that Mixon did in his first few seasons of the league as a slasher, as a downhill runner, but somebody with a little juice. That was the most spring I'd seen in his step in a while. And yeah, they had to fight through it defensively a little bit. Those Colts had some big plays. They didn't run many, but their big play percentage was extremely high. So that's still an issue as they head into a big game against Chicago week 2 that, look, I know they weren't great offensively, but this will be a good test for this defense to face an athletic quarterback and some quality receivers because week 1, they didn't have a ton of answers.
Yeah, I think it's actually more of a testament to what the Colts are going to be this year on the offensive side with a healthy Anthony Richardson. All right, more to come here on NFL Power Rankings presented by Energizer. We touched on Cincinnati at the top of the show. How much of a free-for-all was there in the rankings after losing a game that, quite honestly, no one thought they would lose against the New England Patriots? That's coming up next. Back here on NFL Power Rankings presented by Energizer. Eric's rankings 9 through 16. The Miami Dolphins sitting at 9. Tyreek Hill was obviously the story before the game, during the game, and then after the game. Cincinnati, they fall to 10th. More on them in just a minute. 11th is Green Bay. Not going to see Jordan Love now for a bit. 12th, the Chargers. J.K. Dobbins certainly balled out in this one. The Jets coming off of a loss on Monday Night Football. They are sitting at 13. The Rams, a tough loss in overtime. They against the Lions are 14th. The Bears at 15th. Caleb Williams, tough stats, but he does get that W. And sitting at 16, the Tampa Bay Bucks. I feel like, Eric, you were being kind to Cincinnati with the 10th ranking.
Part of it was being kind. Part of it was protecting my Super Bowl pick. I'm not afraid to admit it. Like I look a little silly right now putting the Bengals in the Super Bowl, but hey, that was 2 weeks ago, man. A million things have happened since then, but hard not to look at that game against the Patriots. Now, granted, our opinion of the Patriots is formed from the last couple of years, but hard not to look at it and think, what happened, right? But you do look back at recent week 1 history with Cincinnati, and they've had some clunkers. Last year was ugly. Burrow was terrible against the Steelers, lost to Mitch Trubisky 2 years ago. So, look, they ended up in the AFC Championship game 2 years ago that season. I'm okay with that. But still, the product is what it is, and it did not look good.
Yeah, sitting at number 12 here, the Chargers. And by the way, Eric, this just looked like a very different Chargers team on offense, dramatically different than what we've seen the last few seasons.
Yeah, a couple busts on defense, right, in coverage. They're still tightening that up, and they had the one long game from Madison they gave up, but hard fought. They were getting after it. There was population of the ball on that side of the ball. Slow start on offense, but when J.K. Dobbins ripped off those 2 big runs, it was the perfect formula for a Harbaugh win. 22-10, ugly, tough. There was a fight at the end. That just was a spur of the moment thing, but still, I think it looked vastly different from what we saw out of Brandon Staley's team a year ago. I think they're legit. Maybe I have them too high, but I believe.
Yeah, I think most of us are starting to believe, because this was the philosophy that we expected. Strong up front, run the football, just going to look a whole lot different with some of those weapons on the outside, or lack thereof, perceived weapons for Justin Herbert. At 13, the Jets. There were moments in the first half, Eric, where I felt like, hey, Aaron Rodgers looks pretty good. Converted on a bunch of third downs, third and long situations to Garrett Wilson. They just didn't have the ball much most of this game and really couldn't make a run.
Got it off to a tough start. Those first two series went badly. Then we saw that third drive when Rodgers and Breece Hall and everybody else, Wilson was looking terrific. We saw the magic late, the old school, get the guy to jump off sides. And it was Leonard Floyd, the guy who injured his Achilles. So it was a cool moment for Rodgers there. He's still got it. But what about that Jets defense, Mike?
Yeah.
I mean, this was supposed to be a top 10 unit. I know there were a handful of games where they had clunkers last year, but for the most part, they were good on that side of the ball. They did give a bad offense a chance to at least try to win games. That was not the case. They could not adjust the same run play over and over. The coverage, the mistakes, the penalties, the substitution errors, it was all there. It really let me down, and it kind of spoiled Aaron's re-entry into the NFL. So we'll see if they can regroup, but that was a tough one.
Yeah, Robert Saleh fired up in the press conference. I was watching that presser when it was done. He said the team will be better. Got to imagine, especially on that side, for the talent that's on the defense, the arrow still is pointing up. They got to figure out how to correct some of those mistakes. Meanwhile, there's some teams that are making some moves. It's time for Power Moves, presented by Energizer. Up 4 spots, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Baker Mayfield, this dude is just tough, Eric, when he's out there.
Yeah, I mean, you look at last year, and even though, Dave Canales is now in Carolina, the Bucs said we saw enough of Baker to bring him back, give him the big money, and he rewarded him in week 1 with a strong performance. Mike Evans 2 touchdowns, Jalen McMillan jumping in. Chris Godwin looked really comfortable and explosive in the slot. So those guys were all locked in. Granted, some of it, has to be put on Washington's defense, which is not where it needs to be right now. Probably a bottom 5 unit, but I love their cohesion, and I just worry a little bit about their defense. They head into this tough Detroit game. That's going to be the biggest thing. Is the secondary healthy enough to handle Jamison Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown and all those guys? Because, this is the type of game next week that they're going to have to really test themselves again. But week 1 did look really good.
I don't expect to see Antoine Winfield out there, and that's part of the issue that you are describing. Eric, there's more to come here. My New York Giants making Sam Darnold look like the second coming of Dante Culpepper. More on both of those teams still to come here on NFL Power Rankings. Back here on Power Rankings, presented by Energizer. Eric's rankings sitting 17 through 24. The Steelers win with a whole lot of field goals. They're 17th. The Browns are 18th. Not sure what to make of Deshaun Watson, which we'll get to in just a moment. At the 19th spot, it's the Jags. 20th, the Vikings. Sam Darnold ridiculously hot in that game. 21st ranked team, the Seahawks. Secondary looking dangerous. The Colts with Anthony Richardson. That dude's flashing a cannon. They sit at 22. The Atlanta Falcons, not the debut. Kirk Cousins or Raheem Morris, we're hoping for at 23. Interesting to note, the Saints right behind them at 24. By the way, Eric, I got to push back on that in just a couple moments here. At 18, though, the Browns. I'm actually worried for this team because Deshaun Watson he doesn't look right.
Yeah, he doesn't. And it's easy to just say it's Watson's fault and clap your hands and everything's good, right? No, this offensive line is a mess right now. The run game is a mess. It doesn't look like they know what they want to do play calling wise. And you're not going to face a front like Dallas's every week, but even my worst fears of what they might have to do coming into this game or what might happen in this game, Dallas just pursued and got after him time and time again. The Browns shot themselves in the foot with penalties. They gave up a long punt return for touchdown too. So it was just every way they could have defeated themselves. But you're absolutely right. We can't brush this Watson thing under the carpet. He doesn't look right. There's a new charges against him as well. What's the dynamic in the locker room? There was a tense moment with Joel Bitonio on the field. So, is the chemistry that drove them to such a great season last year there now? Are they able to overcome this at all? I just don't know. I mean, 18 seems high at this point, but I want to pay homage a little bit to what they have on the roster and what they did last season. So it's a delicate balance here.
I'm with you 100%. I think based off of this week, we'll figure out, maybe get a better sense of clarity around this squad. Meanwhile, at 20, it's the Minnesota Vikings who just dismantled the Giants. Turns out Sam Darnold pretty good.
He's a talented quarterback. I've always said this, right? You look at him in his Carolina opener a few years ago. He played great against his old team, the Jets. This time he gets to do it on his old stadium field against a different team. But yeah, I mean, after that first, 3 and out, I thought he looked absolutely great. Didn't even need to get the ball to Justin Jefferson. Aaron Jones really had a strong third quarter, scored the early touchdown to get them on the board. And the defense got pressure from so many different sources. This Brian Flores group is going to be fun to watch this year if they have the coverage. So, yeah, really all of a sudden an interesting team, especially with Jordan Love. The NFC North race, I think, has changed a little bit. Caleb Williams. Oh, yeah. Vikings are here. They're ready to compete.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and actually very curious to see how this thing unfolds with Sam Darnold if he's able to stay healthy, and Aaron Jones also looking pretty good. The Atlanta Falcons, a week ago, I told you I was high on the squad. They did not look good, candidly, kind of across the board here.
I mean, outside of the pistol formation stuff, if I, just sort of shook your head up and blindfolded you and then took it off and said, does this look like 23 Falcons or 2024? You wouldn't know the difference. It was virtually the same. They didn't get the ball to their playmakers. That was the biggest issue last year. Only 6 passes from Kirk Cousins went to Drake London, Kyle Pitts, the 2 big guys who have to be the weapons there. And Bijan Robinson had a lot of touches, didn't do a lot with them. That offensive line also got worked over. So, yeah, it was just a frustrating day. They say that everything's fine. They're going to knock the rust off of Kirk and he'll be okay. But early results weren't that great.
You know what worries me? If they lose again on Monday Night Football, at what point do we start hearing more of the buzz around Michael Penix? I'm just throwing that out there.
Wow, amazing, yeah.
Isn't it? That's going to be a real deal. I was down there in Atlanta for inside training camp, and people are already talking about how good Penix has looked in practice. Yep. Meanwhile, at 24, I get why the Saints are only 24. It was Carolina that they beat up on, but I got to be honest, they look better than the Falcons. I would have flip-flopped them.
Yeah, and that's a fair argument. I think this is sort of covering my butt a little bit in the sense that I had them too low to start the season. I took my apologies in my power rankings column this week. I said, look, you can give it to me. I deserve it. But the offense, Clint Kubiak, Derek Carr, Rashid Shaheed, all those big play weapons, they made it sing even against the team in Carolina that looked absolutely awful. So give them their flowers. I'm still kind of hesitant, but let's see what the big picture looks like. Maybe this is one of our surprise teams this year. Every year we have a handful.
Yeah, I think there's a real opportunity here. I was talking to David Carr, one of our colleagues at NFL Network, and he, just through his brother Derek, has raved about Clint Kubiak, their offensive coordinator, and how those 2 guys are really on the same page. Meanwhile, the rest of the group, 25 through 32, as we go through Eric's rankings, Arizona found a way to lose, and they sit 25th, but I think there's some optimism around this team that you can pull from. The Titans collapsed, they're 26th. The Patriots, 27. Who thought? They weren't supposed to win. They do move up 4 spots according to Eric. 28th, the Denver Broncos. Bo Nix still a work in progress. 29th, the Commanders. 30th, the Vegas. 31st, the G-Men. And at 32, Carolina. Those 2 teams, they didn't look good. A standout for you for the rest of the group?
Yeah, I mean, not too many standouts in this group. Oh, you mentioned the Patriots. I think you got to give Jared Mayo his credit, right? All the talk about seceding Bill Belichick and not having, Drake May ready for week 1 and all that. What was this team going to look like? They went out and punched the Bengals in the mouth. They beat them. Yeah. It was 16-10, but it felt like a dominant win. That's impressive. And they had this team in full pads in practice, all in camp. That's what got them ready for week 1. Can it last? I don't know.
Yeah. By the way, thank you for not double downing on me on the Giants. Been taking a lot of heat.
I was taking it easy on you this week.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's my squad. Look, the Saquon thing was bad enough, and then to see that performance, oh my Lord. Eric, you're the best, man. We'll do it again next week.
Later.